And, of course, the Occupy movements, we're seeing now some significant victories, I would say. And in Los Angeles, for example, Eric Byler's on the line with us. He's a filmmaker, the co-founder of Coffee Party USA, coffeepartyusa.com, of course, their website. And Eric was there in L.A. during the confrontation with the Los Angeles Police Department. Eric, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. I understand that the difference between the Los Angeles Police Department confrontation, apparently Villaraigosa and his police department are having some coherent communication, was quite different than, for example, Oakland. Well, you tell the story. Tell us what happened.
Well, in Oakland, they have a deteriorating relationship, sorry about my voice, between the community and law enforcement. I think in Los Angeles, the relationship is improving. And I think that the Los Angeles Police Department has actually been showing leadership in something called community police work that involves forming relationships of trust with all elements of the community of color, especially because trust has broken down in the past. I think Villaraigosa was a little bit stung by some events from 2007 May Day immigration rallies at MacArthur Park, and so he has definitely instructed law enforcement to make sure to protect the rights of the protesters and their safety. And what I witnessed was, I think, the utmost professional approach to. What became a battleground was this intersection of Main Street and First Street, and the police needed to clear the street in order to allow traffic to follow, and they were able to do that with no one getting hurt and only 4 arrests.
So in Oakland, it was mutant Teenage Ninja Turtle outfits. It was full riot gear and tear gas and rubber bullets. In Los Angeles, were the police just dressed as cops?
They wore helmets and they had batons.
But other than that, they were not decked out in SWAT uniforms.
Well, I have to say the sight of hundreds of police officers who are armed with helmets was one of the most frightening things I've ever seen. South of First Street, there was a line. It happens that the LAPD headquarters is right across the street from the occupied camp. And so there was a line. Actually, they had earlier in the evening blocked off every direction except for east. As it got toward 4:35 in the morning, when they, basically they had announced that they're not going to enter the camps, that the only reason that they're there is to remove people from the streets. Now, LAPD had created the situation where the streets were full by doing 2 things. 1, blocking off traffic so people could walk in the streets, and 2, creating this line that looked like it could be the staging ground for an invasion. It really kind of did. And so the occupiers felt like they had to confront that line. And many of them actually sat down Indian style, sort of like that horrible footage we saw at UC Davis. Yeah. And so we were all kind of afraid that something would happen. And when when like hundreds of police officers amassed behind that line about 200 yards south and then began to march toward us, I was really concerned that there would be panic. I think the protesters handled themselves well. Many of them, I think were verbally disrespectful and sort of behaving like high school students in the principal's office or at an assembly. But the police officers just let it roll off their back. And even when there were things thrown at the police officers that could have injured them, pieces of wood that were pretty large, they did not lose their composure, and they managed to keep things under control.
So, bottom line, no police riot, and the camp is still there, and now it's going to court, I understand. It's going to be adjudicated on Thursday or Friday?
Yeah, and it was very quiet last night in the camp, and I'm going to visit again today before I see you this evening at your LA studio.
Yeah, okay. Great. And we're talking with Eric Byler, the filmmaker and co-founder of Coffee Party USA. And the carry-home message is that it seems to me, is that what this proves is that the riot police trash the people and the scene techniques used in Oakland and in New York City and a few other cities around the United States, Denver and others, are unnecessary.
I think so, absolutely. I think each department is going to approach it differently, and I think each officer will approach it differently. And where I have concern is when you see really disgusting police brutality on the internet, and then you take that as an excuse to treat all police officers that way, or assume all police officers is that way. It really sort of reminds me of the way that people on the far right will take one thing that an immigrant did and then say we need to treat all immigrants in that way. So I hope that we can improve relationships between law enforcement and the occupiers, because they really are all part of the 99%.
Well, you tweeted about this one cop who studied chemistry and wanted to be a doctor and ended up being a police officer. On the one hand, yeah, there very much is an element of every single one of those people is a human being, an individual, and probably just an average middle class, a schlub sounds negative, but you know what I mean. Just an average guy, or man or woman. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, that was also a description of the people who cleared the Warsaw Ghetto in 1939, 1940, and there's this weird groupthink that happens when people are given uniforms and the power of to use violence that kind of shifts them into a different headspace. And it seems to me that the management that flows from the top down, and that the mayor and the chief of police helped create an atmosphere among their own officers that allowed them to maintain their humanity. Am I making sense here?
Yeah, I mean, my biggest concern is actually above that top, at the top of the 1% media, back in D.C., where I normally am. I witnessed a similar altercation at Occupy D.C. not long after the sniper had shot at the White House. And the police officers they were actually park police. They were extremely aggressive. I think they handled it well. But the occupiers were also extremely aggressive. And this was all really the result of not police policy so much as it was 1% media outlets creating propaganda stories about Occupy D.C. to pressure the police chief to basically issue a statement that Occupy D.C. is no longer a peaceful movement. And then when the occupiers heard that, they said, okay, well then the police are no longer our friends. And then suddenly their relationship was compromised. I don't think we can allow 1% media to impose itself for political reasons on the relationship between law enforcement and the community.
Right, and similarly, we need to avoid people, as happened in Oakland, and I think to some extent in D.C., who are provocateurs. But
yeah.
Eric Byler, thank you very much.